In the first scene, we see a man in a dark room. Physicist Jason Dessen has always woke up to his alarm clock. During breakfast, he was checking how well his son Charlie knew trigonometry. Jason's wife, Daniela, hugged him before leaving for work. On the way to school, Jason allowed the son to drive. When Charlie turns 16, he will get his driver's license. The boy shared with his father that he likes a classmate Brooke. However, Charlie is still afraid to confess his feelings to the girl, especially since another guy, Drew, is also interested in her. Jason received a call from his friend Ryan Holder, who reminded him that they were celebrating an important event this evening. After taking his son to school, Jason arrived at the university where he teaches. In a lecture on quantum physics, he told his students about Schrodinger's cat paradox and the many worlds interpretation. According to this theory, there are an infinite number of parallel realities. Daniela works at an art gallery and met her friend Blair Kaplan here. Due to their busy schedules, the women have rarely seen each other. In his free time, Jason works on his project. He wants to create something that will revolutionize humanity's understanding of the universe. Jason and Daniela are happy in their marriage. He had completely forgotten that he promised to meet Ryan today, who had received a very prestigious physics award worth $1 million. Now Ryan is getting flooded with grants. Daniela believes her husband should go support Ryan. Jason was reluctant to go anywhere, although he was genuinely happy for Ryan. In the end, the wife convinced him to go. The bar where Ryan and his colleagues are celebrating is nearby, so Jason decided to walk. The first thing Jason did was greet the bartender, Matt. Ryan was very happy to see Jason. Both of them hold doctoral degrees. Ryan introduced Jason to his acquaintances. Later, they chatted about work, and Ryan suggested that Jason join his project, but it would require moving to San Francisco. This way Jason wouldn't have to teach, and the salary would be higher. Jason does not want to move from Chicago because his entire life is here. Ryan advised him to think it over. It would be a great opportunity to fulfill himself as a scientist. Jason went home earlier than the others. The wife called him, but he didn't pick up the phone. Jason was so lost in thought that he nearly got hit by a car. It started to rain. A beggar asked if he had $1 to spare. Being a kind-hearted person, Jason stopped. But it turned out that this was not a beggar, but a masked criminal with a gun. The man ordered Jason to get into a car. He had no choice but to comply. Somehow this person knew Jason's name. Now Jason had to do everything he was told, or things would get worse. The masked man ordered Jason to drive away. Jason wondered how this guy knew the password to his phone and about Ryan. Moreover, the criminal was interested in various details of Jason's life. They arrived somewhere. The criminal pushed Jason out of the car and told him to get rid of his outer clothing. After this, handing Jason a flashlight, the masked man ordered him to move forward. Finding themselves in some building, they went downstairs. At one point Jason tried to escape, but it was unsuccessful. The masked man injected him with something, saying they had little time. After this, the criminal told Jason to change clothes. Under the influence of an unknown substance, Jason began to slowly lose consciousness. The masked man opened some kind of box, saying it was an opportunity. Jason could barely move. The man asked if he was satisfied with his life and what else he wanted to achieve. Jason didn't understand what was happening. The masked man said he was doing this for both of them. When asked who he was, the man replied that the truth was too incredible to be believed. Some time later, Jason woke up in an unknown place. People in hazmat suits were performing some procedures on him. A little while later, Jason regained consciousness on a bed in some room. He didn't understand what had happened to him. The room was locked. Jason didn't know how to get out. Soon some woman entered and hugged him. Jason asked who she was. Introducing herself as Amanda, the woman was surprised that Jason didn't recognize her. According to her, Jason had been through a lot, but they would sort everything out. The good news was that Jason's body was clean of radiation, and he was no longer in quarantine. This left Jason even more confused. He didn't know where he was. Amanda took Jason to Leighton Vance, his university friend he hadn't seen in many years. Jason asked what all this meant. The woman said she was Amanda Lucas, a psychiatrist, and Leighton Vance was the lab director. Jason Dessen was the chief scientist and co-founder. Suddenly Jason found himself surrounded by dozens of people who applauded and congratulated him on his return. Leighton claimed that Jason was the only one who had come back. He had been missing for over 14 months. Everyone was now interested in what exactly Jason had seen and how he had managed to return. Jason said his last memory was being at the bar. He had no idea what was happening or who these people were. Right now he just wanted to go home. However, Leighton insisted that Jason stay here for the night because they needed to monitor his condition. Seizing the moment, Jason rushed to escape. Without an access badge he couldn't open the entrance door, but one of the employees who apparently knew him helped. Jason ran again, pursued by Layton and other scientists. He managed to climb over a high fence and ran through the park as fast as he could. Those people continued to follow him, urging to stop. Jason hailed a taxi, giving his address. The driver noticed something was wrong with the passenger. Jason just asked him to drive faster. Meanwhile, Daniela was in the kitchen of their home. When Jason arrived, he opened the door with his keys, but instead of his wife Amanda was here. The man in the mask also turned out to be Jason, but from another reality. Switching places with his other self, he came home where Daniela was waiting for him. Jason looked disoriented. Daniela was unhappy that her husband had stayed late at the bar and hadn't answered her calls. She realized something was wrong. Jason told her that Ryan had offered him a job at a new neurotechnology center in San Francisco. They had a lot to think about. Meanwhile, Jason asked Amanda how she ended up here. Amanda replied that they lived here. Jason demanded to know where his wife and son were. Amanda didn't understand what he was talking about. Charlie's room was set up completely differently for some reason. Jason was shocked to learn that he, not Ryan, had received the Pavia Prize. Jason called his wife's work at the gallery, but the secretary didn't recognize him. Jason kept insisting that he had a wife Daniela, and a son Charlie. Realizing that Jason had lost his mind, Amanda called someone and then tried to talk to him. A few minutes later, Layton and several others arrived at the house. Amanda claimed that Jason didn't have a wife, but he refused to believe it and ran away again. Meanwhile, Jason too took Jason 1's place in his reality. Suddenly Daniela noticed that her husband's arm was bandaged. Jason couldn't explain what had happened because the truth was too unbelievable. Original Jason kept running through the streets. Layton and his men were chasing him. Jason went to the same bar where he had been with Ryan earlier. Surprisingly, the bartender Matt didn't even recognize him, denying that Jason came here often. Thinking it was a joke, Jason laughed, but it quickly became clear that Matt wasn't kidding. Not knowing what to do, Jason went to the emergency room and explained his situation to the doctor. Jason underwent an MRI and was then given a sedative. The entire time Jason thought about his family. Waking up in the morning, Jason too scouted around the house and then went into Charlie's room. Everything was unfamiliar to Jason here, but he had to pretend he had always lived in this house. Jason 1 was woken up by a nurse in the ward. According to the tomography results, he didn't have any serious head injuries, but an unknown psychoactive toxin was found in his body. Also, according to the nurse, there was no one named Jason Desson in Chicago, and there was no Charlie Desson at St. Peter's School. Jason continued to insist that his home had changed. The nurse found information online about Jason Desson, who was a well-known physicist. According to the latest article, Jason Desson had been missing for over a year. Jason tried to find his wife's social media profiles online but was unsuccessful. The nurse believed that Jason should undergo a full examination. Meanwhile, Amanda and Layton were searching for Jason, concluding that he might have gone to the hospital. Putting on a white coat, Jason pretended to be a doctor to escape from here. Jason too continued to get accustomed to the new reality. He went to the university and entered a lecture hall where a thermodynamics lecture was taking place. The bored students were barely listening to the lecturer. Apologizing for being late and thanking the lecturer for covering for him, Jason took over the lecture. The first thing he did was ask the students to put away their phones, saying that in the future they would regret not listening attentively enough. Amanda was very worried about Jason. Layton managed to find out that Jason had been in the emergency room yesterday, but his current whereabouts were unknown. Perhaps Ryan knew something. Jason 1 arrived at the gallery where his wife worked and asked the girl issuing the passes where the artist named Daniela was. Jason searched for her everywhere and suddenly saw paintings depicting himself. It seemed he was really famous. Suddenly Jason saw Daniela and approached her, hugging. She recognized him but had no idea who Charlie was. Ryan was also here. It turned out that during those 14 months, many rumors had circulated about Jason's disappearance. Ryan was upset because he had developed some preparation almost single-handedly, but all the credit had gone to Jason. Daniela made a toast, thanking the guests for coming. She was especially grateful to Jason, who had inspired her for this exhibition. In the evening, Jason too asked his wife about her upcoming trip. Daniela was going to have an exhibition in another city. Jason expressed his desire to accompany her. Jason too finds it strange to have a son, but he has to play his part. Charlie was surprised when the father advised him not to confess his feelings to Brooke first, even though he had said the opposite yesterday. In the evening, Jason had dinner with Daniela and Ryan. They were curious about where he had been for the past 14 months. Jason replied that having a beloved wife and son, he went to a bar to celebrate his friend's prestigious award. But on the way back something happened. When Jason woke up, the reality around him had changed. Daniela and Ryan thought this was madness. Jason asked Daniela how he had inspired her for the exhibition. Daniela mentioned their long-ago conversation when Jason said that theoretically, each of them could exist in an infinite number of worlds. Daniela asked Jason who Charlie was, whom he had asked about earlier at the exhibition. Jason replied that Charlie was their 15-year-old son. Ryan, on the other hand, was supposed to be a famous neurobiologist. This sounded like nonsense. Moreover, Jason's words angered Ryan, and he hurriedly left. Jason too is living the life of his counterpart from an alternate reality. Daniela was surprised that the husband took her toothbrush. Jason once stayed the night at Daniela's house, who was worried about her friend. Perhaps together they could figure out what had happened. Jason is sure that he hasn't gone crazy, but for now it certainly looks that way. In Daniela's house, Jason looks for things that remind him of his original reality. He is willing to do anything to get his old life back. Meanwhile, the second Jason fully embraced his role. The question is, why did he need to do this? Later, Jason called Ryan and said he was declining his job offer. Jason spoke quite rudely, which took Ryan by surprise. Upon receiving a call from Jason, Amanda was very excited and asked where he was. Jason said he was heading to a psychiatric hospital. Amanda immediately went there, not knowing that Jason had deceived her and was planning to examine the house with Daniela. Jason had supposedly always lived here. He still couldn't remember anything about what was in this house. Everything Jason says sounds crazy, but despite everything, Daniela wants to help him. Jason was shocked to learn that in the past, Daniela had been pregnant. However, he had stated that he wasn't ready for family life, and since then, their paths had diverged. Jason simply refused to believe this. How could he have done such a thing? In the house, Jason found no answers. He feels guilty towards Daniela, although she no longer holds a grudge against him because it happened so long ago. Jason clearly remembers all the years spent with Daniela. She doesn't know what's happening, but somehow she believes him. Jason too went to a warehouse where he keeps a gun, some kind of box and many other things, including a mask. Jason 1 realized that his version from the alternate reality managed to bring his crazy project to completion, which involved inventing a container where a person ends up in a state of superposition. This allows a person to move between realities, as quantum theory suggests. Jason guessed that the person who kidnapped him was himself. That is his other version. Jason too chose research over family life, which led to the creation of the container. Now that Jason decided to swap places with his alternate version to get the perfect family he had once refused. The ring mark on his finger confirms Jason 1's words. Daniela still has feelings for him. She wants to know what their life was like in the alternate reality. Jason told her that they were happy. Although Daniela's pregnancy was unplanned, it was the best thing that happened to them. Of course, the first years were not easy. Because Jason had to spend more time with his family, he lost funding, and Daniela quit painting. However, despite this, they did not regret anything. For Jason, family is the most important thing. Now he wants to fix everything. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Daniela's phone rang. Someone hung up immediately. A woman burst into the house and shot, taking Daniela's life. After this, the stranger paralyzed Jason with a stun gun and tied him up. In the middle of the night, Amanda received a call from Layton. What she heard shocked her. It was Layton's men who kidnapped Jason and brought him back to the lab. Layton is truly sorry it has come to this. None of them were prepared for Jason's return and what had happened to him. Right now Jason represents a danger to himself, so Layton cannot let him go. Before his disappearance, Jason invented something brilliant that could completely change humanity's understanding of the universe. Jason too and Daniela were having dinner at a restaurant. Daniela noticed that lately her husband had become more romantic. Here she ran into an old friend, Barbara. Jason pretended to know Barbara too, who asked if everything was still on for tomorrow. Jason had no idea that there was supposed to be a dinner party at their house tomorrow. Detective Jamie Mason came to Layton's office to ask about Jason Desson. Layton lied that many months ago, Jason didn't show up for work, and since then, no one had seen him. It turned out that Jason wasn't the only missing lab employee. Some time ago a scientist named Blair Kaplan also disappeared. Layton feigned surprise when Detective Mason said that 3 days ago, Jason showed up in the emergency room, from where he escaped. The detective also knew that before his disappearance, Jason was in a romantic relationship with his colleague, Amanda Lucas. Amanda didn't like having to lie to the police. Layton is only concerned that if the police find out the truth, all their work will be for nothing. The container has been operational for a year and a half, and Layton cannot allow it all to be in vain. They wonder how Jason managed to return. While Jason was locked up, Amanda and Layton pondered why he doesn't remember anything. Perhaps the superposition somehow affects the brain. Understanding that he had no choice, Jason agreed to talk. He doesn't remember what this place is and why Layton wants to keep it a secret so badly. Layton said that each of them had put their all into this project. Jason asked Layton to show him everything. They took Jason to the container, the Schrodinger's cat box in reality. Jason remembers that in his world, he tried to invent a small cube for superposition, but he never managed to completely isolate the contents of the cube from the external environment. Layton explained that they used various alloys and smart materials to achieve such an effect. So far Jason is the only one who has entered the container and managed to return. There are 3 other people who disappeared. Inside the container, no recording devices work, so it's impossible to understand how it operates. Jason learned that their colleague Blair Kaplan was the first test subject. When she didn't return, he went next out of guilt. After that, Layton anonymously found 2 volunteers who also didn't return. Layton showed Jason a surveillance camera recording where he enters the container. Amanda tried to stop him but didn't make it in time. After that, Jason simply vanished, only to reappear 3 days ago, crawling out of the container. Jason too bought an expensive gift for his son. He is still getting used to his role as a father. Later, Jason too was browsing through social media profiles of his friends to ensure no one would realize at the upcoming dinner that he didn't know them. Blair Kaplan, by the way, will also be in attendance. Meanwhile, Jason 1 was getting acquainted with his own biography in the new reality. He truly doesn't remember Amanda, who works in the lab as a psychiatrist, handling the psychological preparation of volunteers. Before Jason disappeared, they had been living together for over a year. Jason asked what happened on the day of his disappearance. Amanda said that they woke up in the morning, and she immediately sensed something was bothering him. Moreover, shortly before entering the container, Jason met with his ex-girlfriend. Jason told Amanda that he is not the same Jason who entered the container 14 months ago. This made Amanda worried. There was about to be the dinner party at the Dessen house. Jason was rehearsing the names of the family friends out loud so as not to mix them up later. During the party, Jason mingled freely with everyone. No one suspected anything. However, he was not pleased to see Ryan Holder here, whom Daniela had invited. Ryan doesn't understand what's happening with his friend. It's as if he has been replaced. Layton concluded that Jason remembers nothing about his life because it's not his life at all. Before them stands an imposter, another version of Jason. The question is, where is their Jason now? When Layton began to press for answers, Jason couldn't stand it and attacked him. During dinner, when Daniela asked the husband to remind her of the name of the hotel where they stayed last Thanksgiving, he recalled a photo he had seen on the stolen phone of his other version. While Jason 1 was being pressured to answer where the original was, Jason 2 raised a toast to his wife and friends. Layton didn't want to hurt anyone, but now he has no choice. He holds the key to the container in his hand but doesn't know how to use it. This annoys Layton. Unfortunately, Jason has no idea how to use the container either. It was created by another version of him. Layton wants to use the container to find better worlds where humanity might have conquered cancer, poverty and other issues. But so far no one but Jason has returned. When the guests left, Jason 2 and Daniela danced a slow dance. He couldn't have dreamed of greater happiness. Daniela is even worried that the last few days have been so wonderful. It was Ryan who ratted Jason out to Layton, and now he regrets it. That's how they found Jason. Ryan didn't think it would come to this. Hearing that Daniela is no longer alive, Ryan was shocked. His guilt deepened. Hugging Ryan, Jason asked him to calmly explain what kind of preparation he had created. Ryan said he synthesized a substance that changes the chemical composition of the prefrontal cortex. The preparation can essentially put certain parts of the brain to sleep for an hour. Jason explained to Ryan that they seem to have achieved superposition in humans. Theoretically, this is impossible. The brain wouldn't allow it, but Ryan's preparation prevented the decoherence of consciousness. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Layton, who asked Ryan to come with him. Jason too told his wife about that evening when he was returning from the bar. Jason was deep in thought and almost got hit by a car. At that moment, his entire life flashed before his eyes. Now Jason clearly understands that nothing is more important than family. Amanda wants to help Jason escape. When asked about Ryan, Amanda said she was sorry. They walked so that no one would notice them, but as they exited the elevator, they ran into Layton. Jason pushed Layton away, and they escaped again on the elevator. Jason and Amanda found themselves trapped. The container was the only way out. Amanda was forbidden access to all the lab rooms, unlike Jason. They ran, dodging bullets. Layton couldn't allow anyone else to learn the truth about this place, but Jason and Amanda managed to lock themselves in the container. After that, they injected themselves with the preparation that prevents consciousness decoherence. Then they both felt faint. They didn't know exactly how the container worked. Jason too is watching videos from the family archive to get to know the life of his alternative version that he stole. While rummaging through documents, Jason came across the birth certificate of Maximilian Dessen. Did he and Daniela have another son? Exactly an hour later, Jason and Amanda woke up in a dark, endless corridor. There is chaos in the lab. When the container door opened, Layden went there. Jason and Amanda are walking down the corridor with countless doors. In theory, behind one of them lies Jason's reality. This corridor is the superposition, the interweaving of an infinite number of realities. They decided to take a risk and open one of the doors, finding themselves in an abandoned place. Ash was flying everywhere. Outside, Jason and Amanda saw empty streets. This was a post-apocalyptic world where humanity had gone extinct. The sun was barely visible through the clouds. It seemed like the aftermath of a war or a global catastrophe. Buildings were collapsing before Amanda's and Jason's eyes. They ran and re-entered the corridor. Daniela often remembers Max, who has been gone for a long time. Even after all this time, it brings her to tears. Charlie is learning to drive under his father's guidance. By the way, today is his 16th birthday. Jason is eager to spend more time with his son. Out of 50 doses, Jason and Amanda have 48 left. It seems that the container's coordinates remain constant, only the external world changes. Jason still doesn't understand how the container works. But this time they know what to prepare for. The corridor likely has no end. Meanwhile, Layden is searching for Jason and Amanda. However, the multiverse is infinite, so these searches could go on forever. Jason dislikes students using gadgets during lectures. In his alternate reality he didn't teach, and now it bores him. Eventually Jason quit his job. Meanwhile, Jason 1 and Amanda went through a random door, finding themselves in a forest. Opening and closing the door several times, Jason confirmed that the world behind each door doesn't change until the preparations effect wears off. Behind the next door, the sun had grown to an enormous size, destroying the atmosphere and all life on Earth. Fortunately, Jason and Amanda managed to shut the door in time. Unwilling to believe the reality of the situation, Amanda ran, but as Jason said, the corridor has no end. This is the multiverse, where all possible probabilities are realized. Now they must keep checking all the doors in the hope that one of them will lead to the world they know. Soon, Amanda and Jason found themselves in the reality where they hadn't escaped from Layden. Amanda was shocked to see her own demise. Jason hurriedly brought her back into the container. They must keep trying. Behind the next door, Jason and Amanda found themselves in the middle of a vast ocean. Behind each new door, Jason and Amanda saw worlds crazier than the last. When Amanda opened the next door, a strong wind knocked her off her feet. Jason tried to convince Amanda to go back, but she couldn't stay in the corridor any longer. They ended up lost in the blizzard. To warm Amanda, Jason hugged her. Suddenly he noticed a house ahead. They headed there to hide from the wind and cold. It seemed that the owners had abandoned the house long ago for unknown reasons. Jason managed to find matches and warmed up Amanda, who was still unconscious. Layden got lost in the endless corridor. Jason too met with Layden, a university friend. In this reality they hadn't seen each other in many years. Layden drinks a lot and spends his father's money, who is in business. It turned out that 3 months ago, Ryan had asked Layden to fund a project of his. Layden guessed that Jason was also here for this reason. Layden no longer finances friends' projects because it's always a headache, but he's willing to listen to Jason anyway. In one of the countless realities, morning came. Stepping outside, Jason saw empty, frozen Chicago ahead. It looked like civilization had ended. Jason and Layden arrived at the warehouse, and Jason showed his friend a special psychoactive preparation. Jason took his dose, and Layden followed suit. They had little time. In the post-apocalyptic reality, Jason kept the fire going, otherwise they would freeze to death. Jason found a photo of the family that used to live here. Daniela took out photos and belongings of her deceased son Max from a box. The memories were painful for her. Under the influence of the preparation, Layden felt a strong dizziness, unlike Jason, who was already used to it. Jason showed Layden the container. When asked what this thing was for, Jason said it was better to see it firsthand. Despite his fears, Layden followed the friend. Jason told Amanda that the container was buried in snow. Amanda couldn't understand how, as an experienced psychiatrist, she could have panicked so easily. When Amanda mentioned how she once got stuck in a snowstorm with her father as a child, Jason asked if she had thought about it yesterday in the corridor. Perhaps the unlimited number of doors in the corridor was not arranged randomly, and their minds could somehow influence it. If so, they could move anywhere and return home. Jason too and Layden found themselves in the container. Layden felt anxious. Moreover, it scared him that Jason was saying some very strange things. Suddenly Layden realized they were already in some corridor. This frightened him even more. Jason asked Layden to keep calm and not think about bad things, otherwise they might perish here. Meanwhile, Jason 1 and Amanda were trying to dig the container out of the snow. They couldn't survive in this reality, so they had to get out as soon as possible. In any of the realities, the coordinates of the container do not change. Finally, Jason and Amanda managed to find it. Daniela asked her son if he was ready. Charlie was upset that his father was still gone, even though they were going to spend time together. Amanda and Jason were back in the container. Now they knew for sure that they could find the right reality by the power of thought. Suddenly Jason remembered that today was his son's birthday. Sitting in front of the oak where Max's ashes were buried, Charlie asked his mother to tell him about his brother. Daniela told her son that at the first ultrasound, she and the father learned they were expecting twins. Jason was telling Amanda the same thing at that moment. Jason and Daniela were not ready to become parents, but they were happy. Max was born first but did not live long due to congenital defects. Amanda said how sorry she was. Charlie listened with tears in his eyes. He missed his brother very much. Jason too and Layden stepped out of the container. Layden couldn't comprehend what he had seen. It was hard to believe, but it was the most amazing thing Layden had ever seen. Jason explained that he was from another reality where they had built this container together. That's why Jason trusted Layden more than anyone else. Layden asked Jason what he was doing in this reality. Jason replied that he was trying to correct a past mistake. Layden could have left his reality without a second thought because there were many things he regretted. And here was his chance. Meanwhile, Jason 1 and Amanda had a heart-to-heart talk in the container. Amanda said that original Jason was not happy, so he completely dedicated himself to work. Jason stated that he had been kidnapped by an alternate version of himself. The other Jason must have had a compelling reason to want a different life, one where he didn't live in such wealth as in his original reality. Obviously it was about Daniela and Charlie. That's why he chose this particular Jason among billions of others. Daniela and her son were cooking dinner together. Suddenly Charlie asked his mother if she thought something was wrong with the father. At that moment Jason appeared, apologizing to the family for being late. As an apology, he gave his wife a bouquet of flowers and his son the keys to a new car. Charlie was thrilled. Daniela wondered where her husband got the money for the car. She was even more shocked to learn that Jason had quit his job. Moreover, he wanted his wife to return to painting. Daniela didn't understand how they would support themselves. Jason revealed that he had found an investor. Charlie hugged the parents, thanked them for the gift, and suggested they all go for a ride together. Jason whispered to his wife that they no longer needed to worry about money. Next we see wounded Layden walking down the endless corridor. Opening one of the doors, he found himself facing sand-covered Chicago. This was one of the post-apocalyptic realities. Closing the door, Layden continued on. Jason 1 and Amanda were also walking down the corridor. They were trying to think of a familiar reality so they could see what they need behind the next door. However, when Jason opened the door, water gushed into the corridor. In this version of reality, Chicago was almost submerged. The container began to sink rapidly. With effort Jason managed to close the door, and the water receded. Amanda asked Jason what he really felt when he opened the door. Jason replied that he was overwhelmed with emotions. Amanda suggested waiting for their emotional state return to normal or it wouldn't work. They did just that, playing word games to distract themselves. Then Amanda talked about her mother, who suffers from bipolar disorder. Jason's mother had long passed away from cancer, but Amanda already knew that. When asked who first tested the container, Amanda replied that it was Blair, who was the chief engineer for the container's development. She had volunteered on launch day. Jason was next, followed by 2 more anonymous volunteers found by the laboratory. No one knows what happened to them. Amanda and Jason managed to get some sleep. When they woke up, they were no longer in the superposition corridor but in the container. This meant that the preparation's effects had worn off. They decided to open the door to understand which of the many realities they had landed in. It was the laboratory, and no one was here. The elevator wasn't working, and almost all the rooms were locked. It seemed the emergency protocol had been activated. In one of the unlocked rooms, there was a terrible smell. It was here that Jason and Amanda discovered a body. They needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. Suddenly a person with a flashlight appeared, and they hid, ready to run on command, but the woman pointed a gun at them. However, upon recognizing them, the woman immediately lowered the gun. It was Blair who tearfully hugged Amanda. Blair had lost hope that anyone was looking for her. Jason explained what had happened. In his world he and Blair were not colleagues, she was his wife's friend and worked as a bioethics lawyer. In this world the laboratory was Blair's refuge. She had been here for 3 months because the earth was overrun by giant insects. Almost nothing was left alive outside. Blair had a few doses of the preparation, but she wasn't ready to return to the container yet. Layton asked Jason 2 which world he had visited was the most insane. Jason described a reality where Earth had become a barren desert after an apocalypse. Now Jason had the key to the multiverse. Layton was determined to find the best version of reality for himself. Jason warned him that extreme caution was needed inside the container, or they might never return. But Layton wasn't deterred. It was a 1 in a billion opportunity. Before entering the container, Jason warned once again that they needed to be completely honest with themselves inside. Blair warned Amanda that traveling between worlds could drive one mad. Amanda was here because she wanted to save this version of Jason, but Blair advised her to prioritize her own safety. No one knew where this journey would ultimately lead them. In the container, Jason and Layton took a dose of the preparation and found themselves in an infinite corridor. Behind the first door, they saw a bustling city. Later, Jason explained to Layton that they could only travel to worlds adjacent to theirs, not across the entire range of the multiverse. That is, these are worlds that split up not too long ago. If the preparation's effects wear off while you're outside the container, it will still remain in the same place. Before Jason and Amanda left, Blair handed them a notebook with her notes on world travels. It might seem like you can just imagine the desired world and end up there, but in reality it's not that simple. You need to learn to control your fears and subconscious desires. Jason and Amanda re-entered the container. Amanda couldn't understand why the Jason from her reality didn't want to return, even though he was the only one who had learned how to do it. He could have helped them all. Perhaps Jason knows why his alternative version did this. In his reality, Jason gave up his scientific career for his family. But if he had chosen differently, he wouldn't have stopped at anything for his quantum physics research. Jason too probably concluded that his brilliant invention wasn't worth it. Jason too taught Layton to control his subconscious to find the desired world. They only had 12 vials left. In theory Jason could get more, but the process of making was very complex and expensive. Layton stated that he was ready to pay $1 million for each additional dose. The first Jason thought it would be more effective to not imagine the desired world, but to write about it in a notebook. This would help them concentrate. Behind the next door, Jason and Amanda found themselves in the place where Jason's alternative version had kidnapped himself. Could it have worked? When they stepped outside, Jason was convinced that this was his home world. At least it seemed so at first glance. Amanda had a bad premonition and wanted to return, but Jason said he had to visit his home. Moreover, to learn how to control the container, they needed to know where it was taking them. All the streets were empty and the cars abandoned. Jason managed to start one of them. The empty city made Amanda increasingly anxious. What had happened in this reality? They arrived at Jason's home. The door was opened by terrified and pale Daniela, who hadn't expected to see her husband because he had been taken away recently with severe symptoms. Daniela wouldn't let Jason touch her, fearing she might infect him. Charlie, she said, had passed away right in his room. Suddenly the military and a doctor in protective masks arrived. During the quarantine, no outsiders were supposed to be on the streets. Jason begged them to help his sick wife. After a rapid test, they confirmed that Jason was healthy. The doctor refused to take Daniela to the hospital because all the emergency rooms were full, and it was pointless. Daniela wouldn't survive until morning. Jason didn't understand what was happening. The doctor advised Jason not to come into contact with his wife and handed him 5 morphine injections. This would relieve Daniela's suffering, as the last 8 hours of the illness were the most horrific. Amanda tried to convince Jason to leave this reality because if he got infected, he would never find his real wife. However, Jason couldn't leave Daniela and went into the house, giving her the morphine. Daniela cried, telling her husband how much she missed him. Seeing their family photo on the wall, Jason couldn't hold back his emotions either. Memories were all they had now. Jason now understood more than ever that every day from his past life had been perfect. Daniela asked him to give her the morphine injection. Soon Jason and Amanda left, returning to the container. Amanda comforted Jason, who felt broken. He was willing to do anything to get his old life back. They decided to take a break before continuing their journey. The good news was that Jason hadn't been infected. This time he mustn't think about bad things to return to his original reality. Jason's biggest fear was losing his family to illness, just as he had once lost his mother. Amanda was sure that the problem lay in this. The subconscious is a very tricky thing. Through the next door, they found themselves back at the abandoned warehouse. Outside everything looked normal at first glance. Maybe this time they had made it. Daniela was getting ready for bed. It had been a long day. Jason 1 intended to meet his alternate version. Meanwhile, Jason 2 apologized to his wife for not initially telling her about Charlie's car, quitting the university and the investor. Daniela felt that her husband was not the same as he used to be. She just wanted them to be honest with each other again. Jason 1 entered his house without Amanda, while his alternate version was telling Daniela about a project funded by Layton. Jason 1 took a knife and went upstairs, bursting into their bedroom. Seeing her husband, Daniela was clearly frightened. When he dropped the knife, she immediately picked it up and screamed at Jason to stay back. After that, Daniela quickly called the police, stating that her ex-husband, who was supposed to be in prison, had come to her. Charlie attacked his father, yelling that he should never return. Jason didn't understand what he had done in this world. Hearing the police sirens, Jason hurriedly left the house and told Amanda they had to get back to the container immediately. Traveling by car or subway wasn't safe, so they needed someone they could trust. Amanda took Jason to her mother's house, who was horrified to see her daughter. It turned out that Amanda was no longer alive in this world. Jason thought it would be better if Amanda just hugged her mother and left. Taking the keys to the woman's car, Jason and Amanda headed to the container. They never found out why Jason was in prison in this reality. However, Jason didn't want to know. Their journey continued. But they didn't know that in the world Jason 2 came from, the container was being monitored, and a notification of a non-local intrusion had already been sent. Alternative, Jason was informed that his copy, along with Amanda, had been here some time ago. This Jason also entered the container. Layden was thrilled to learn that Jason had managed to obtain 50 doses. Jason stated that they would have to seal the container, but only in this reality. Daniela returned to painting, as her husband had wanted. However, she was not ready to leave her job at the gallery until she was sure of their financial stability. Jason claimed that the deal was already done. Daniela had never seen such amounts of money before. Charlie asked one of his parents to take him to the skate park. By the way, Charlie had a date with Brooke there. He still didn't feel confident enough to drive. The father supported him in everything. At the skate park, Charlie met Brooke. The father wished him luck and then handed Layden the box with 50 doses of the preparation. Layden had already guessed that Jason came to this reality because of Daniela. This also explained his desire to seal the container. Jason just wished his friend well, hoping he would find what he was looking for. Later, at the agreed time, Jason picked up his son from the skate park. Apparently the date didn't go well. Brooke left with another guy, Drew. To comfort the son, Jason bought him ice cream and advised to stand up for his love. Suddenly Charlie had an allergic reaction. Jason too had no idea that his son was allergic to peanuts. In a panic, Jason started searching Charlie's backpack for an antihistamine injection, then took him to the emergency room. Daniela arrived immediately upon hearing what had happened. She couldn't understand how her husband could forget their son's allergy. At some point, Daniela noticed injection marks on Jason's arm. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to take in all the details of his alternate version's biography. Daniela hadn't changed her mind about leaving the gallery, which upset Jason. Daniela asked him when he started using dental floss. Jason replied that he had always used it. Meanwhile, the container led Jason 1 and Amanda to a forest. Jason was still working on controlling his subconscious. There weren't many injections left, but they had to keep trying. After going for another door, Jason takes notes in the notebook, just like Blair once did. However, the more details he considers, the more confusion arises. Everything gets mixed up, creating new realities. With fewer attempts remaining, Jason continues to fail again and again. Their efforts could go on forever. During this time, they have visited many similar but not quite exact versions of Chicago. None of these worlds belong to Jason. They decided that tonight they would sleep in a hotel instead of the container. This would help relieve some of the psychological stress. That night, Jason and Amanda had a delicious dinner at a restaurant. They found out that in this reality, Amanda works as a manager at a burger joint. The different ways their lives could unfold in alternate worlds seemed astonishing. Amanda said that the Jason she knew had a more difficult personality. The point is that a person's character is shaped throughout their life. Tonight they planned to have a lot of fun, knowing they would leave this reality the next day. At the hotel that night, Jason instinctively hugged Amanda, not immediately realizing she wasn't his wife. Wandering between worlds was gradually driving them insane. Perhaps they would never find the reality they were seeking. Jason too visited a psychotherapist, sharing that he had put in a lot of effort to achieve his ideal life, but not all his expectations had been met. The psychotherapist was Amanda Lucas. She explained to the patient that people always experience disappointment when they have overly high expectations. Daniela shared with her friend Blair that her husband had started behaving completely differently than before, and this was evident in small details. Now Jason wants to figure out how to make it up to his wife and son for the peanut ice cream incident. He needs to show them his genuine care somehow. What worries Daniela the most are the injection marks on her husband's arms and the fact that he often disappears at night. Blair advised her friend not to confront Jason directly but to follow him. However, Daniela doubts that this is a good idea. After the session, Amanda asked the patient how he found out about her. Jason replied that it was from an ex-girlfriend. That evening, Jason told his wife that he had a surprise for her and took her to a charity auction. Daniela did not expect to see a painting she had recently made here. Daniela didn't like it and asked the husband to take her home. For Daniela, it was extremely humiliating because her colleagues had no choice but to hang her unfinished painting in the gallery. The couple argued. Daniela turned out to be different from what Jason imagined. He just wanted her to be happy, but Daniela realized that Jason actually only thought about himself. Later, as Blair had advised, Daniela decided to follow her husband, who as usual went to the warehouse. Daniela hid and after Jason left, wanted to check what was inside. The door was locked, but Daniela managed to reach through the gap at the bottom for an ampule. After that, she immediately took the ampule to Ryan. Of course, she had no idea that her husband owned the warehouse. Ryan had no idea what the drug was but promised to find out. Then they would decide together what to do next. Amanda told Jason that she needed a day to be alone. They agreed to meet tomorrow evening at the container. In the gallery, Jason met Daniela, or rather one of the infinite versions of her. In this reality, she was an artist. Jason suggested they have coffee in the evening, but she politely declined. In this reality, Amanda has a husband and son. She watched from a distance at one of the versions of her own life. It seemed Amanda was happy here. In the evening, she and Jason as agreed met at the container. They would soon run out of ampules and options. At the hotel, Amanda read through Jason's notebook. Perhaps he had overlooked some details. However, Jason no longer knew how to focus his own subconscious. While he stepped out to clear his head, Amanda began writing something in the notebook. Jason observed his alternate version in this world. Amanda was anxious because Jason was significantly delayed. He said he had been watching himself. Now Jason started to understand how his double had pulled it off. He had probably been spying on him for weeks. Amanda had already lost hope because the world they were searching for was like a grain of sand on a vast beach. Moreover, they only had 10 doses left between the two of them. That's why they needed to try something different. Jason too continued his therapy sessions with Amanda. He now dreamed of escaping from everything. When asked how he envisioned this escape, Jason replied that it would be an endless corridor with doors, each leading to a version of a life he could have lived. In the evening, Ryan approached Jason on the street and showed him the ampule. Ryan thought that his friend had refused to work with him because he was stealing his ideas. They went to a bar. Ryan couldn't understand how Jason had come up with this because he had wanted to synthesize something similar for a long time. Jason swore to Ryan that he had never seen his research. Ryan was currently negotiating with several pharmaceutical companies and couldn't afford to let the information leak. Jason tried to understand how Ryan got the ampule. Ryan didn't answer. When asked what the preparation was, Ryan evasively replied that it was a safe analog of anesthesia. When Jason was asked a question in return, he suggested that Ryan see how the preparation worked rather than hear about it. They arrived at the warehouse to the container. Jason said it was his secret project and injected himself with the preparation, inviting Ryan to do the same. After that, they entered the container together. Suddenly an endless corridor appeared before them. Ryan couldn't comprehend how this was possible or what was happening. Jason explained that this was their brain's attempt to visualize five-dimensional probabilistic space, also known as superposition. Ryan couldn't believe they were now in a quantum state. This corridor was the container in all possible states. And behind each door was another variation of a branched reality. Before they opened one of the doors, Jason urged Ryan to stay calm because what they would see depended on their emotional state. The guys found themselves in another version of Chicago, more advanced and friendly. Ryan was in awe. Suddenly Jason asked for Ryan's phone to take a picture. While Ryan marveled, Jason slowly walked back to the container, saying there were countless worlds and countless Ryans. At that moment, Ryan realized that the Jason before him was not the one he had always known. Jason closed the door, leaving Ryan in that reality. Later, when Ryan's phone received a call from Daniela Dessen, Jason realized who had given Ryan the ampule. Leighton's friend, Anthony, arrived at the warehouse. He and his team were preparing to seal the container. Now Jason too would never be able to leave this reality. Daniela sent messages to Ryan, but he had disappeared. Jason returned with groceries, expressing a desire to cook dinner himself. Charlie helped his father with this. The doorbell rang. Detective Mason was standing there, explaining that she was investigating because Ryan Holder's girlfriend had reported his disappearance. Daniela said that the last time she saw Ryan was 5 days ago at his home, and she didn't notice anything unusual about his behavior. Jason said that he had seen Ryan 3 days ago in a bar, which was confirmed by surveillance camera footage. According to Jason, Ryan drank heavily that night, which was unusual for him. After the bar, Jason claimed he went home and knew nothing about Ryan's whereabouts. When Detective Mason left, Daniela showed her husband the ampule she had found at the warehouse. She had given a second one to Ryan to find out what it was. Jason revealed to his wife that it was an experimental preparation that blocked the functions of certain parts of the brain to observe macroscopic objects in superposition. Jason also claimed that it was Ryan who had invented this preparation for him, but due to a non-disclosure agreement, he couldn't tell anyone about it. Daniela was frightened by everything that was happening. Perhaps her husband's behavior had changed due to the side effects of the preparation. Jason promised to stop. Daniela wanted to know what was in that warehouse. Jason reluctantly replied that there were many things for his project. Meanwhile, Jason 1 and Amanda were walking through the endless corridor again. This had been going on for 29 days, so Amanda, as a doctor, believed they needed a break. It was better to use 2 additional doses than to go insane. Behind the next door, they saw more progressive and peaceful Chicago. Jason and Amanda spent the whole day walking through the streets of an ideal city that combined technology and nature. Amanda had always dreamed of being in a world where people lived in peace and technology did not destroy the environment. They drank cocoa from edible cups, and then they went to a restaurant where they just chatted. Amanda was thrilled with this version of Chicago. Suddenly she decided to leave, saying they would meet in 2 hours. It would be a surprise. Jason stayed in the restaurant. Suddenly 2 guys approached him, asking him to take their picture. By the way, these guys thought Jason and Amanda were a couple. 2 hours later, Amanda was already waiting for Jason in a restaurant at the top of a skyscraper. She was wearing a beautiful dress, and she had prepared a suit for Jason. They drank wine. Jason gave Amanda some candies that she had loved as a child. In this world, Jason Dessen works as an insurance agent, and Amanda Lucas went missing 2 years ago. She was born in Seattle, which is now part of the country of Cascadia. Thanks to facial recognition and iris scanning, Amanda was able to get a new passport in 10 minutes and access all the accounts of the Amanda who had gone missing. She had quite a bit of savings. That's why Amanda, who can no longer return to her world, decided to stay here. This means Jason would have to continue searching for his home without her. Unlike Jason, Amanda has no one waiting for her in her world. She wished Jason would stay here too, but he couldn't. Amanda understood and let him go. Before leaving, Jason wanted to give Amanda a couple of ampules in case she didn't fit into this world. But Amanda refused, saying that a perfect world doesn't exist. How they build their life depends only on them. Here, Amanda would start a new life from scratch. Perhaps without her interference, it would be easier for Jason to concentrate on getting home. Hugging Amanda, Jason discreetly placed 2 ampules into her bag. After that, their paths diverged forever. Amanda couldn't hold back her emotions, but this would be better for both of them. Taking one last look at perfect nighttime Chicago, Jason returned to the container. Behind the next door, he saw his home burnt and ruined, just like the other houses on the street. Jason had only 2 attempts left. In the next reality, he called Daniela to hear her voice. There was another Jason in this reality, so the original had no place here. Suddenly his attention was drawn to a mask in a store window. Jason could take over the life of his alternate version. At night, he snuck into his and Daniela's house. In the bedroom, he watched himself and the wife from the side. Realizing he couldn't do what his alternate version had done to him, Jason went down to the kitchen and sat on the floor, crying helplessly. Hearing footsteps, Jason was about to leave, but the son had already noticed him. Jason didn't immediately realize it wasn't Charlie but Max. The boy was very sad because he had failed his trigonometry exam and disappointed his parents. Hugging his son, Jason said that wasn't true. After that, Jason was about to return to the container. Meanwhile, Jason 1 continues psychotherapy with Amanda. Jason is considering leaving Daniela, but the therapist said he's trying to run away not from his wife but from himself. Amanda doesn't understand how Jason knows so many facts about her, including her self-sacrifice. It was as if Jason had looked right into her soul. Unable to hold back her emotions, Amanda insistently asked the patient to leave. Detective Mason came to the Dessen house again. The fact is, the police checked Ryan's phone activity and mapped his route the night he disappeared. The detective wonders what Ryan was doing on the opposite side of the city alone. Jason continued to insist that he knew nothing about this. Jason had to return to the container. He smashed the concrete frame with a hammer. Later in an alternate reality, Jason 2 was drinking with Ryan in a bar. In this world, Ryan is not a scientist but the owner of a car repair shop. It turns out life can take very unexpected turns. Many years ago, Ryan was expelled from university for drunk driving. In this version of reality, the guys weren't friends, but just happened to meet in the bar, though Ryan had a feeling he had seen Jason somewhere before. When Ryan got very drunk, Jason brought him to the reality he had come from. Ryan was unable to stand and was completely out of it. Jason cleaned Ryan up, cut his long hair and put him to bed. In the morning, Ryan would wake up in his apartment, and all police suspicions would be lifted from Jason. Jason 1 had only one attempt left to return home. He made notes in his notebook, recalling in detail his first meeting with Daniela. It was nothing short of fate. Then Jason injected himself with the preparation and walked down the endless corridor. Jason was not ready to take the place of any version of himself. He wanted to get back to his own life. Gathering his resolve, Jason opened the door and stepped out of the container, sealed with concrete, through the broken breach. On the warehouse floor, he saw an empty ampule. So far everything in this reality matched the one Jason had returned from. When the bartender Matt recognized Jason, he joyfully hugged his old acquaintance. Jason ran through the snowy night streets straight to his home. Seeing the house where the best years of his life had passed, Jason was speechless, still not believing he had made it back. Through the window, Jason saw his wife helping their son with homework. Alternate Jason arrived home, stating that Ryan had been found and was now a bit out of it after a prolonged binge. All this time original Jason was watching them, then headed to a gun store. When the clerk asked Jason to show his firearm owner's identification card issued by Illinois police, he hesitated and instead bought a pepper spray and a combat knife. A minute later, Jason entered the gun store again and said he wanted to buy a gun, leaving the clerk confused. The woman reminded Jason that they had just discussed this. Hearing that someone exactly like him had been here, Jason was horrified. This Jason was the original because he had a rubber band on his finger instead of a wedding ring as a reminder. Jason ran outside, not understanding what was happening. Charlie loves to draw. The father asked him where his mother was. Charlie replied that she had gone to Ryan and his girlfriend Mandy's place because something was clearly wrong with them. When Jason 2 was taking out the trash, one of his alternate versions attacked him. A fight ensued, during which Jason 2 took the doppelganger's life. Ryan was very disoriented. He recognized Daniela, who in his reality was a client of his auto repair shop. When Ryan had somewhat recovered, Daniela asked him what the last thing he remembered was. Ryan said he met some man in a bar who kept buying him drinks. When Daniela showed Ryan a photo of Jason, he recognized him. Mandy was planning to take her boyfriend to a clinic because something was clearly wrong with his head. Meanwhile, original Jason was determined to become the only Jason in this reality. Soon in the hotel corridor, he ran into one of his versions. The other Jason started to run. Original Jason followed his double outside, but when he turned around he saw another Jason, who in turn was following him. At the same time, alternate Jason was hiding the body in the garage. Suddenly Charlie came in, saying that the pizza had been delivered. The son offered to help his father in the garage, but Jason assured him he could handle it alone. Original Jason was trying to escape from his double and entered the bar, ordering a drink. Matt was surprised at how quickly Jason drank his beer. At that moment, Jason saw one of his countless copies sitting at a table. Why had so many of them gathered in one reality? Seeing two identical Jasons, Matt was utterly bewildered. Jason sat down at his double's table. It felt like madness. It turned out that both Jasons had been kidnapped by an alternate version. Moreover, they both witnessed the taking of another Daniela's life, and Amanda helped them escape. The Jasons speculated that their different versions had repeatedly appeared in the container. Some might have gotten lost or perished, while others ran out of doses. But those who made the right decisions eventually returned to this version of Chicago. Every choice made in the container created a new version of Jason. It's mind-boggling. The original asked the other Jason where his Amanda was. He replied that he lost her in a very dark world. The Amanda who was with original Jason was much luckier, as she remained in her perfect world. Both Jasons had run out of doses. Alternate Jason suggested to the original that they get rid of the Jason responsible for all this. All those who consider themselves Jason 1 share one thing: a desire to exact revenge on Jason 2. It's unknown how many Jasons have reached this reality, but there could be dozens or hundreds. Jason 1 watched as other Jason went into the hotel. Meanwhile, Jason 2 couldn't sleep, nor could Daniela. Jason 1 waited in the park until morning, then went to a cafe to have some coffee. When Jason lit a cigarette, an elderly woman reprimanded him, but it didn't make him stop. A waitress called the manager, who insisted the customer stop smoking. However, Jason was intentionally looking for trouble. A detective entered the cafe and forcefully escorted Jason out, pushing him into her car. Daniela noticed more and more oddities about her husband. When asked how Ryan was doing, she replied that he wasn't doing well. Jason took his son to the university campus for a tour. Charlie wasn't sure he could get into the university. It was here on this campus that Jason once met Daniela. His entire life hinged on one random moment. Suddenly Jason 2 saw his double in the distance and hurried to get the son out of here. The double followed Jason 2. Meanwhile, Daniela managed to sneak into her husband's warehouse, where she found many suspicious items, including ampules. Some of Ryan's things were also here, including his phone. Someone called from an unknown number. Jason, too clearly nervous, led his son into the university library. One of the Jasons continued to follow them closely. Charlie noticed the father's nervous state, who couldn't allow his son to see another Jason. Handing Charlie the car keys, Jason ordered him to drive, even though the boy hadn't yet obtained his driver's license. Charlie didn't understand what was happening or why his father was acting so strangely. The chase of one Jason by another continued in the library. Eventually in the restroom, Jason too managed to sneak up on his double from behind and attacked him, taking his life. It happened again. Meanwhile, Charlie was very nervous on the road. When he broke a rule, the police pulled him over. Jason dragged the body into a bathroom stall and used a knife to lock it from the outside. After this, Jason ran out of the campus and seeing an officer next to his car, smoothed things over. Getting into the car, Jason ordered his son to drive. Meanwhile, original Jason was released after being arrested. Signing all the papers, he walked into the hall and saw his wife. After long wanderings between worlds, he finally found her. Earlier Jason had intentionally smoked in the restaurant and provoked the police to lure Daniela to a place where they could talk. Daniela of course posted bail for her husband but was tired of his lies. Jason tried to explain to her that the last time they saw each other was before Ryan's party at the bar. That Jason is actually not him but his alternate version, who built the container and gained access to other realities. Naturally Daniela didn't believe the husband. Jason asked her to call him right now. Hearing the husband's voice on the phone, Daniela was horrified. When Jason too called back, Daniela, barely holding back her emotions, said she wanted to spend this Christmas at Florida Kiss like the last one. Jason too agreed, not knowing they had never been there. So it turns out it's all true. Realizing her son was now with alternate Jason, Daniela became worried, still not fully understanding how this was possible. Jason said there are many other versions of him in Chicago. Right now Daniela is only thinking about getting Charlie back. Jason 1 and Daniela arranged to meet at the oak tree where Max is buried. They came up with a code word, Jupiter. However, Daniela couldn't promise that she and Charlie would come. The truth bordered on madness. Parking in an alley behind the house, Daniela wanted to send her son a message asking him to leave unnoticed by his father, but she changed her mind and went into the house herself. Jason too was hurriedly packing, saying their family needed to leave Chicago immediately. He promised to explain everything later. Charlie was also packing. Jason didn't let his wife and son talk alone. Daniela tried her best to stay calm. Going downstairs, she sent Charlie a message saying they were in danger. Taking the phone from the table, Charlie went outside. Daniela asked Jason to help her get a suitcase from the basement, then suddenly pushed him and closing the door ran away. Mother and son drove off and then switched to Jason 1's car. Charlie didn't understand what was happening. Jason tried to explain to his wife what had happened after Ryan's party. Daniela realized this wasn't the Jason she had spoken to at the police station and asked him to stop the car. When Jason got distracted from driving, they had an accident. Taking advantage of this, Daniela and her son ran out of the car. Each Jason claimed to be the original. The Jason whom Daniela had spoken to at the police station was waiting for her and Charlie at the designated place. He correctly named the code word. Jason hugged his son for a long time after a long separation. One of the Jasons went down to the basement of their house, demanding Jason 2 tell him where his family was. However, Jason 2 had no idea where Daniela and Charlie were. Realizing the culprit of the reality split was of no use, Jason attacked him. Meanwhile, Jason 1 drove his family away from Chicago. Daniela still couldn't comprehend what was happening. Dozens of Jasons were sending her messages professing their love. Charlie was also receiving dozens of messages from copies of his father. Daniela decided it was best to turn off the phones. Jason was not prepared to deal with not just one double but a vast number of them. Charlie suggested his parents hide in his friend James's house, where he usually spends the summer with his family. Charlie knows the alarm code. The alternate versions of Jason won't find them here. Charlie asked his father if it was true that all those doubles were also his father's. Jason answered both yes and no. Daniela couldn't even imagine what her husband had to go through to get back to his family. Right now Daniela wants everything to be the same as before, but that's impossible, since so many versions of Jason are stuck in their reality. At night when Daniela fell asleep, Jason gently covered her with a blanket and then turned on the computer. Logging into his account, Jason discovered that all the other Jasons had created a group chat. They were all looking for Daniela and Charlie. Each of them believed they deserved the family more than the others. Some Jasons suggested joint custody of the son or that a few of them team up to get rid of all the others. Jason 1 felt that someone was watching the house. He couldn't sleep. He did manage to get a little nap after all. Waking up in the chair, he saw a note from his wife saying she was at the beach. Daniela shared that at first, she loved life with new Jason. It was like the beginning of their relationship. But gradually Daniela began to realize that this wasn't her husband. Jason 1 understood that Jason 2 was in a way him. His fate was determined by the choice he made when he learned about Daniela's pregnancy. Jason told his wife that he had seen a version of her that didn't get married. She became an artist and lived in a beautiful loft. But was Daniela truly happy without a family? Meanwhile, one of the many Jasons woke up in his bed, thinking about the wife. Later, he turned on his laptop and accessed Jason 1's banking history, trying to track his route. Jason 2 was tied up. Daniela and Charlie had turned off their phones, so it was impossible to know their location. Jason demanded Jason 2 tell him where his phone was, the one he had taken from him under the bridge. Jason 2 had to answer to save his life. Concerned, Blair wrote to Jason that she couldn't reach Daniela. Jason 1 confessed to his wife that last night he found a chat with hundreds of Jasons who managed to return. They all want their family back. One of them even suggested holding a lottery. The winner would stay in this reality, and the others would have to leave. Another Jason suggested joint custody. Of course Daniela didn't like any of these options. Jason 2 was shocked to hear that the Daniela from his reality was no longer alive. Layton did this. The same thing happened to Ryan. Amanda, Jason 2's girlfriend, was forever lost in one of the realities. For Jason, Amanda was willing to do anything. Only now did Jason 2 realize the terrible mistake he had made. Jason 2 seriously thought that the alternate version he would switch places with would like his life. Blair wrote that she would be there in 10 minutes. Charlie told his father that Brooke and Drew were dating. However, right now, Charlie wasn't concerned about that. Jason was not surprised to learn that the imposter didn't know about the son's allergy or about Max. The family had breakfast. Everyone tried to joke to relieve the nervous tension. They couldn't stay in this house for long anyway. Besides, Jason had stolen Blair's car. Meanwhile, she entered the Dessens' house, immediately feeling that something was wrong. Bloodstains confirmed her worst fears. Going upstairs, Blair heard strange sounds. In the closet she found a tied-up Jason 2. Seeing his exact copy, Blair was speechless from shock. Jason calmly asked Blair to track her car, but she, hitting him, ran away. Jason had to pull out his gun to make her stop. Pretending to comply, Blair used pepper spray and took the gun from Jason. She demanded both Jasons explain what was going on. In the evening, Daniela asked the husband to tell her about the other realities. Everything she and Charlie had heard sounded too incredible. All these realities exist around them right now, but in different dimensions. Daniela was happy that her real husband had returned. She wanted to know if there were any worlds where he had wanted to stay. Jason replied that at some point, he lost all hope of returning home. But despite that, Jason kept searching for his reality. Now the Dessens were simply enjoying every moment spent together. While her husband and son watched TV, Daniela entered the chat where hundreds of Jasons were communicating. Right now the only important thing was that Daniela, Jason and Charlie were together. Later, Daniela confessed to the husband that she had read the chat and told all the Jasons that she had made her choice. Downstairs in the kitchen, Jason saw someone outside the window and grabbed a crowbar. Outside, Jason saw his wounded alternate version. One of them did this. Wounded Jason didn't want to die without seeing Charlie. When a shot rang out, Jason 1 returned to the house and told his wife to get their son. Another Jason had also broken into the house. He was holding a shotgun. This Jason ordered Jason 1 to give him all his clothes and to name the code word if there was one. At one point Jason 1 lunged at the alternate version, disarming him. A fight ensued between them. Another Jason appeared and took the life of the alternate version. At that moment Daniela and Charlie came downstairs. It turned out to be Jason 2. He handed Daniela the gun, indicating that he no longer intended to harm anyone. Suddenly Charlie hit Jason 2, who had managed to find them by tracking Blair's car. However, other Jasons had followed him. Now Jason 2 wanted to fix his mistake and give Jason 1 and his family a chance to escape. He handed him the car keys. Before the Dessens left, Jason 2 gave Jason 1 his wedding ring. Daniela and Jason realized they had nowhere to run. Suddenly Charlie noticed that Jason 2 had left something for them. It was a set of ampules, about 40 doses. There was also a bag with Max's ashes and a recording on a phone. In the recording, Jason 2 said that the mistake of the past, which could not be fixed, had driven him to build the container. Jason 2 envied the version of himself that had a family. The Dessens understood that their only way out was to go into the container, but hundreds of Jasons were waiting for them at the warehouse. However, they were not there to prevent them from leaving for another world, but to say goodbye. For each of the Jasons, the most important thing was that Daniela and Charlie were safe. The Jason that Daniela had chosen was now responsible for their family's well-being. The Dessens entered the container and made the injections, preparing to search for their new reality. Lives in parallel worlds went on as usual. One of the many versions of Blair finally decided to leave the creepy insect world. Layton from Jason 1's reality was still traveling between worlds. Somewhere Amanda and Ryan had found their happiness. In the final scene, we see Charlie, Jason and Daniela opening a door and stepping through it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.